Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to the part of you that knows you're capable of more. The part that whispers late at night, this isn't who I really am. And the truth is, you're absolutely right. We now know from neuroscience and psychology that the brain is not fixed. It is plastic. It can change biologically, chemically, and behaviorally in response to focused effort. It means you are not stuck. Your identity is not a life sentence. But here's the catch. You have to force it. You have to deliberately interrupt the autopilot. You have to push the nervous system to override its old pathways, its outdated patterns, the habits, the emotions, the self-talk that's been running the same script for years. This speech is about resetting your life, not gradually, not someday. Now, and I will walk you through how science supports that this reset is possible with tools, not just talk. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to wait for motivation. What you need is a decision backed by action, because action rewires the brain. Let's begin. Most people wake up each day and unknowingly repeat the exact same patterns. Thoughts, emotions, behaviors, all wired deeply into the nervous system. This is what we call the autopilot mode of the brain. It's a mechanism designed for efficiency, not excellence. And while this automatic mode may help us conserve energy, it also keeps us stuck. It makes change feel impossible because we aren't fully present to notice the need for change. That's why the first and most critical step to resetting your life is to interrupt that autopilot. You must break the pattern deliberately, even if it feels uncomfortable or unnatural. Your brain is designed to follow the path of least resistance. It builds neural circuits based on repetition. If you've been thinking in terms of doubt, fear, laziness, or procrastination for months or years, your brain doesn't see that as bad. It sees it as familiar, and the brain prefers familiar, even if it's dysfunctional. So every time you wake up and go through your routine, same phone scroll, same coffee, same self-talk, you're reinforcing that identity, that personality, that life script. Change, therefore, can't happen passively. It has to be forced into existence through intentional disruption. Science shows that one of the most effective ways to do this is through pattern interrupts. That could be something as small as waking up and taking a cold shower or delaying your phone usage for the first hour of the day. Why? Because these are not your norm. They signal to the brain me something is different today. Pay attention. The moment the brain is forced to pay attention, it opens a window of plasticity, a chance to lay down a new pattern. You can use this window to inject a new behavior, a new thought, or a new mindset. This is why habits are powerful, but also why they're hard to break. Most people try to reset their lives by trying to think differently, but thought alone is too weak to interrupt an entrenched neurological pattern. It's not enough to want change. You have to act in ways that are different enough to send a biological signal through the system. Real reset begins when the nervous system is exposed to discomfort on purpose and is allowed to respond in a new way. That's where growth lies. Let's take an example. Let's say you've been stuck in a loop of lethargy and self-doubt, waking up late, skipping exercise, procrastinating. If that's your baseline, you've trained your brain and body to believe this is your identity. To interrupt that, you need to do the opposite. Wake early, move your body, and start your day with discipline. Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. The difficulty is the trigger. That friction is what wakes up the higher order centers of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, and gives you the chance to decide differently. The moment you choose action in the face of resistance, you are literally changing your brain. This isn't a motivational trick. This is neuroscience. You are carving new circuits, activating new chemicals, and shifting the direction of your life at the most fundamental biological level. And you must do it repeatedly. One pattern interrupt is a spark. Many create a fire. You are training your brain to operate with intention rather than convenience. And over time, that becomes your new autopilot, but one that is built for growth, not stagnation. Another powerful tool is environmental change. You see, the environment is one of the strongest reinforcers of behavior. If your workspace, your home, your social circle all reflect the old version of you, it's going to be harder to break the loop. Change something. Rearrange your room, take a different route to work. Leave your phone in another room, Talk to people who don't know your story. These may seem small, but they matter because they shake up the cues your brain associates with habit loops. And when the cue changes, the behavior that follows can too. But here's the true thing: you will not feel ready. The system doesn't reset itself automatically. There's no signal that says, now is the right time. In fact, the very idea of waiting until you feel ready is just another loop keeping you stuck. The reset begins the moment you move in spite of the doubt, in spite of the resistance. Force is not a harsh word in this context. It's a necessary word. You must force yourself to move differently, because once you move differently, you feel differently. Once you feel differently, you think differently. And once you think differently, you live differently. So if you want to reset your life, stop trying to think your way into a new chapter. Act your way into it. Disrupt the loop. Interrupt the script. Do something. Anything. That breaks the pattern. The brain will notice, and that's where the reset begins. Stress is often misunderstood. Most people treat stress like a warning sign, something to avoid at all costs. But that perspective ignores one of the most important truths about the human body and minding. Stress is information. It's not the enemy. It's a signal. And when you begin to treat stress as data rather than danger, you gain power over it. Instead of letting it stop you, you can start using it as a tool for transformation. The stress response, elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, heightened awareness, isn't random. It's a survival system that evolved to prepare us for challenge. What most people don't realize is that this same system, when consciously harnessed, becomes a powerful tool for growth. That spike in adrenaline, that surge of cortisol, it's not there to hurt you. It's there to sharpen you. It's your body saying, "Look, this matters." Pay attention. Mobilize energy. Prepare to act. And if you can learn to face stress instead of fleeing from it, you gain access to a higher level of functioning, both mentally and physically. But this shift doesn't happen automatically. You have to reframe your relationship with stress. The first thing you must stop doing is interpreting stress as failure. People often think that if they feel anxious or pressured, something must be wrong. That belief alone creates a secondary layer of suffering. Now, you're not just stressed. You're stressed about being stressed. But the truth is, stress is part of the reset process. When you try to change your life, when you force yourself to break habits, shift identity, and move against the grain, your nervous system pushes back. That resistance is natural. It's expected, and it's useful because it means you've stepped into unfamiliar territory. Growth only lives in that space. You see, the key isn't to eliminate stress, but to reinterpret what it means. In the field of neuroscience, this is called cognitive reappraisal. It's the ability to shift how you view your experience, even if the experience itself doesn't change. When you start telling yourself, this stress I'm feeling means I'm doing something important, you engage different brain circuits. You begin to associate discomfort with development, and that changes everything. Suddenly, hard things don't feel like threats. They feel like stepping stones. Another layer to this is how you breathe. Breathing isn't just a relaxation tool. It's a signal to the brain. Fast, shallow breathing tells your body you're in danger, whether you actually are or not. Slow, controlled breathing tells the brain you're safe. That simple act can modulate your stress response. So when stress rises, you can either let it consume you or use your breath to stabilize your internal state. One technique backed by research is the physiological sigh, a double inhale followed by a long exhale. This single breath pattern can down your heart rate and clear carbon dioxide from your bloodstream, literally calming the body in real time. Now, once you've stabilized, that's when the real work begins. You lean into the stress. You treat it like resistance in the gym. You understand that it's a form of pressure that forges capacity. Every time you hold your ground in a stressful moment, whether it's a difficult conversation, a tough workout, or a moment of doubt, you are teaching your brain resilience. You're proving to yourself that pressure doesn't break you. It builds you. This is why it's crucial to seek out controlled stress. Put yourself in situations that challenge you on purpose, not recklessly, but with intent. A tough workout, a cold plunge, a public speech, a new skill. These controlled stressors train your nervous system to tolerate and thrive under pressure. And over time, they build what's known as stress inoculation. Just like a vaccine trains your immune system to handle a virus, exposing yourself to manageable stress trains your mind to stay clear and effective when life gets intense. You start to realize that growth isn't found in comfort. It's found in the precise moment when you feel tension rise and choose to stay with it instead of retreat. That moment, repeated over time, wires your brain for strength. You begin to understand stress not as a storm to run from, but as a signal to step into, a cue that tells you you're on the right path. Not the easy one, but the meaningful one. And this shift, this complete redefinition of stress, is essential to resetting your life, because the process of transformation is not smooth. It's not calm. It's filled with friction, but that friction is what burns away the old version of you and clears the space for what's next. And if you fear stress, you'll never walk that path. But if you learn to listen to it, to breathe through it, and to step forward anyway, you'll build a new identity on the other side of pressure, not despite the stress, but because of it. The human brain has a remarkable ability known as neuroplasticity, the capacity to rewire itself based on experience, behavior, and focused attention. This is not just a scientific concept. It is the very foundation for change. What this means is that you are not stuck with the patterns, habits, or even personality traits you were born with or developed over time. You can reshape them. You can build new circuits and eliminate old ones. But neuroplasticity is not a passive process. It doesn't occur just because you want it. It requires deliberate action, repeated over time, and paired with deep focus and emotional intensity. That's how real transformation happens, not by accident, but by precision. When people say they want to reset their lives, they often mean they want to feel different, think differently, or behave differently. But none of that can happen unless the brain actually changes. And the way you change the brain is through focused, consistent action. Thoughts alone don't rewire the brain. Emotions alone don't rewire the brain. Movement, especially intentional, uncomfortable movement, is what sends the strongest signals to your neural circuits. It tells your nervous system, this is new, this matters, pay attention. And when the brain pays attention, it learns. That is the biological reality behind every successful life reset. Let's make this practical. Suppose you've been living in a cycle of self-doubt, avoidance, and procrastination. You've trained your brain to associate discomfort with danger. You avoid hard tasks. You delay conversations. You numb out on distractions. Each time you do this, you strengthen those circuits. You reinforce the wiring that says, I avoid difficulty. Over time, that becomes automatic. But now, if you decide to do the opposite, even just once, you initiate change. If you feel fear and still take the action, if you feel resistance and still lean in, your brain has to adapt to that. It creates new connections. It starts to fire in a new direction. And with enough repetition, those new paths become default. It's important to understand that this doesn't happen with motivation. It happens with mechanics. You have to show up, not just when you feel like it, but especially when you don't. Because neuroplasticity favors what's repeated, not what's inspired. Consistency beats intensity when it comes to wiring new behaviors. Doing 10 push-ups every day trains your brain more effectively than doing 100 push-ups once a month. Writing one paragraph a day builds a stronger creative circuit than writing 10 pages once a year. It's not about how much you do in one sitting. It's about how often you engage with that new pattern. Emotion plays a powerful role too. Emotional intensity acts like a highlighter in the brain. It tells your nervous system, this matters, remember this. That's why moments of pain, challenge, or deep meaning are often the most transformational. If you pair a new action with a strong emotional state, like courage, fear, excitement, or urgency, you accelerate the process of neuroplasticity. So when you challenge yourself to do something uncomfortable and you feel your heart racing, your breath quickening, and your mind shouting for you to stop, that's the sweet spot. That's the window for change. The key is to step through it, not back away. Movement is also critical. Physical action, especially coordinated or effortful action, sends strong signals to the motor cortex and other brain regions involved in learning. That's why building routines involving movement, like exercise, posture shifts, breathing protocols, or even handwriting helps encode new habits at a deeper level. The body is not separate from the brain. It is part of the same system. When you change how you move, you change how you think and feel. That's why forcing yourself to stand tall, breathe deeply, or train physically can be an act of mental reprogramming. Another overlooked element of neuroplasticity is focus. When your attention is scattered, the brain doesn't register new patterns as clearly. But when your attention is sharp and directed, the brain takes a snapshot of that moment and reinforces it. That's why multitasking is the enemy of transformation. If you want to reset your life, you have to bring full presence to the new actions you're building. Whether that's a workout, a conversation, or 5 minutes of journaling, do it with full focus. That level of presence strengthens the neural connections, turning new behavior into lasting change. There's no magic trick to this. It's about putting in the reps, not just in the gym, but in life. Showing up, repeating, failing, repeating again. Each repetition is a signal. Each signal is a message to the brain. Adapt, and your brain listens. It molds. It evolves. Not overnight, but absolutely over time. This is the power you already have. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be activated deliberately, consistently, and with intention. That's how you use neuroplasticity to reset your life, not by wishing for a new identity, but by building it action by action, circuit by circuit, day by day. Changing your life doesn't begin with a grand declaration. It begins with systems. Systems are the silent architects of identity. They are the routines, the processes, the micro decisions repeated over time that shape who you become. Most people think they need to feel different to act different, but neuroscience and behavioral psychology show that it's the reversio. If you want to become someone new, you must act like that person consistently until the identity catches up. And that process is driven by systems, not motivation. Identity is not something you find, it's something you build, and daily systems are the tools that do the construction. Imagine someone who sees themselves as undisciplined. That identity wasn't formed from a single event. It was formed by hundreds of repeated actions, skipping tasks, making excuses, giving into short-term comfort. These patterns become internalized. The brain starts expecting that behavior. Over time, it becomes automatic. The only way to reset this pattern is to create new systems, simple, consistent behaviors that directly contradict the old narrative. When you act like the person you want to become, even if it feels fake at first, you begin to teach your nervous system a new way to operate. You're not pretending, you're practicing. A powerful system doesn't have to be complex. In fact, the simpler, the better. The brain thrives on clarity and repetition. That's why starting with or two non-negotiable daily habits is far more effective than trying to change everything at once. You might decide that no matter what, you'll wake up at 6 a.m., journal for 5 minutes, and do 10 minutes of movement. Those 3 actions, done daily, begin to send a message. I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone who prioritizes growth. Over time, that message becomes internalized. The system becomes identity. There's a reason systems are more powerful than goals. Goals are about outcome. Systems are about process. Goals say, I want to be fit. Systems say, I train at, say, a.m. every day. Goals can inspire, but they don't sustain behavior. Systems create rhythm, and rhythm creates consistency, and consistency wires the brain for change. When your behavior becomes predictable, your brain adapts to support it. Neural circuits strengthen around those actions. Dopamine begins to attach to those routines. And suddenly, what felt unnatural becomes automatic. Another benefit of systems is that they reduce friction. When you rely on willpower, you're constantly negotiating with yourself. But when you have a system in place, you remove the need for decision. The structure eliminates the debate. You don't ask yourself, do I feel like it? You simply follow the plan. That mental freedom is a game changer. It allows your energy to be spent on execution, not hesitation, and it removes the emotional drain of back and forth internal dialogue. Systems also give you data. When you're consistent with small habits, you can see what works and what doesn't. You can adjust, you can refine. But without systems, you're flying blind. You might feel lost or overwhelmed because there's no pattern to analyze. Systems provide stability. They give you something to come back to when life gets chaotic. They act as an anchor in the storm, keeping you tethered to the version of yourself of you're trying to become. It's important to design systems that fit your current level. If you set the bar too high, your brain perceives it as a threat. The key is to create habits that are challenging enough to require effort, but simple enough to repeat daily. That repetition is what makes the behavior sticky. Over time, the emotional resistance fades, the neural resistance fades. The system becomes second nature. Another piece of this is identity reinforcement. Every time you follow your system, you reinforce the belief that you are changing. You build trust with yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of all transformation. When you start seeing yourself as someone who follows through, you gain momentum. That momentum becomes motivation. You don't need to wait to feel inspired because your system is already moving you forward. It's working behind the scenes, shaping your brain, your behaviors, and your beliefs. You also have to protect your systems. Distraction, chaos, and noise are the enemies of consistency. Create boundaries around your habits. Design your environment to support them. Put visual cues in place. Prepare your workspace. Automate as much as you can. Systems are fragile in the beginning. They need protection and focus. But once they're established, they become your greatest asset. They do the heavy lifting of identity change for you. So if you want to reset your life, don't just visualize the end result. Build the daily systems that reflect it. Let your habits speak louder than your hopes. Anchor your identity in action, not intention. Because in the end, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the strength of your systems. And if your systems are strong, your life will follow. The way you speak to yourself creates the environment your mind lives in. Most people underestimate the power of internal dialogue, but neuroscience confirms that self-talk isn't just background noise, it is instruction. Every thought you repeat becomes a suggestion to your nervous system, shaping your perceptions, emotions, and ultimately your behavior. The stories you tell yourself about who you are, what you're capable of, and what you deserve are not just reflections of your reality. They are tools that build that reality. If you want to reset your life, you must first reset the way you speak to yourself. From a neurological standpoint, the brain doesn't care whether a statement is positive or negative, true or false. What it cares about is repetition and intensity. If you constantly think, I always fail, or I'm not disciplined, your brain takes that as fact and begins to reinforce circuits around it. You begin to see the world in ways that confirm that belief. This is called confirmation bias, and it's hardwired. You will literally filter reality through the lens of your internal narrative. So every time you reinforce a negative identity through self-talk, you're not just describing the past, you're scripting the future. This is why internal narratives are so critical to transformation. If you want to change your life, you can't keep speaking the language of the old version of yourself. You must become intentional with your thoughts. That doesn't mean lying to yourself or using hollow affirmations. It means choosing language that aligns with your desired identity. Instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, you say, I'm learning how to do this better. Instead of, I'm lazy, you say, I'm building consistency. These may seem like subtle shifts, but they change the way your brain fires, the chemicals it releases, and the behaviors it expects. One of the most powerful tools for changing internal narrative is catching negative self-talk in real time. The moment you hear that critical voice say, you can't do this, stop and interrogate it. Ask, is this thought useful? Is it helping me move forward? That pause breaks the loop. It gives you space to replace the thought with something more constructive. The goal is not to avoid discomfort, but to avoid unproductive self-attack. There's a difference between honest self-assessment and chronic self-sabotage. One fuels growth. The other traps you in the past. Another method is scripting your future identity. This is not about fantasy. It's about wiring your brain for a new direction. Every day, take a few minutes to write or speak statements like, I am becoming the kind of person who follows through. Or, I make choices that align with my highest self. When spoken with emotion and consistency, these phrases create new mental blueprints. They give your brain something new to work with. And when paired with action, they begin to reprogram the subconscious. Visualization amplifies this effect. when you visualize yourself behaving in a new way. Confident, calm, focused. You activate the same neural networks as if you were actually performing the task. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagination and experience. This means you can practice new ways of being before you live them. When you combine visualization with intentional language, you create a powerful feedback loop. Thoughts influence behavior, and behavior reinforces thought. Another key factor is emotional tone. If your internal voice is harsh, punishing, or full of shame, your nervous system goes in defense mode. You operate from fear, not growth. But when your inner voice is firm yet compassionate, you trigger a different state, one of curiosity, resilience, and openness. This doesn't mean being soft or letting yourself off the hook. It means guiding yourself the way a strong coach would, with clarity, accountability, and belief. You don't grow from shame, you grow from strategy. It's also worth considering where your internal narrative came from. Many of the most damaging thoughts we carry aren't even ours. They were given to us by parents, teachers, society. Somewhere along the way, someone told you who you were or weren't, and you believed it. But beliefs can be challenged. They can be replaced. Your mind is not a storage locker for outdated opinions. It is a living system capable of renewal. Every day, you have the chance to write a new script. This is not easy work. Changing your inner dialogue takes effort, awareness, and repetition. But the rewards are profound. When you begin to speak to yourself with vision, belief, and responsibility, everything else starts to shift. Your actions align. Your energy improves. Your resilience increases. You stop being your biggest critic and start becoming your greatest coach. So if you want to reset your life, listen closely to the voice inside your head, because that voice is not just narrating your story, it's creating it. Change the story and you change the future. One sentence at a time. Resetting your life isn't just about changing your mindset. It's about changing your state. And to truly change your state, you must begin with your physiology. The body and the mind are not two separate systems. They are deeply intertwined. What happens in your nervous system, your hormones, your breath, and your posture directly affects how you think, how you feel, and how you act. If you try to shift your life while ignoring your body's baseline state, you'll constantly feel like you're swimming upstream. But if you learn to reset your physiology, you gain control over the way you experience life at its most fundamental level, and that makes lasting change possible. One of the fastest and most powerful ways to change your physiology is through breath. Breath is the only function that is both automatic and under your control. It gives you a direct handle on the nervous system. When you're stressed, your breathing becomes shallow and fast. This signals danger to the brain, which then keeps your mind in a reactive state. But when you slow your breath and take deeper, more controlled inhales and longer exhales, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for calm, clarity, and recovery. That shift isn't mental. It's physical, and it changes everything from your heart rate to your ability to focus. One specific technique supported by neuroscience is the physiological sigh, a double inhale through the nose, followed by a slow, long exhale through the mouth. This type of breathing naturally occurs when the body wants to release stress, like during a deep emotional sigh or after crying. But when done deliberately, it can rapidly calm the nervous system and reduce anxiety in under a minute. Making this practice a part of your daily routine, especially in moments of stress or transition, can reset your internal state so that your mind has a better environment to operate from. Movement is another powerful lever. The body was designed to move, and when it doesn't, it suffers, not just physically, but mentally. Regular physical activity, even something as simple as walking or stretching, increases dopamine and endorphins, improves cognitive function, and helps regulate mood. But it's not just about working out. It's about using movement strategically. For instance, fast, intense movement like sprints or resistance training boosts adrenaline and primes you for action, which is ideal when you need motivation. Slower, rhythmic movement like walking or yoga balances the nervous system and restores energy. When you align your movement with your emotional state, you create a physical foundation that supports whatever psychological reset you're working toward. Posture is another underestimated signal. The way you hold your body sends constant feedback to your brain. A slouched posture compresses the chest and restricts breathing, often signaling defeat or fatigue. But standing tall, opening the chest, and holding your head high sends a very different signal, a signal of readiness, confidence, and strength. Research shows that body language doesn't just communicate with others. It communicates with yourself. If you want to feel different, start by standing differently. Walk with purpose. Breathe with control. Look forward instead of down. These are not just cosmetic changes. They are neurological cues. Sleep is one of the most important physiological resets. When you're sleep deprived, every system in your body suffers. Cognitive performance drops, emotional regulation weakens, stress hormones rise, and decision-making becomes impaired. If you're trying to change your life while operating on poor sleep, it's like trying to rebuild a house during a storm. Prioritize sleep like your life depends on it, because in a very real way, it does. Go to bed at consistent times, reduce blue light exposure in the evening, and create a wind-down ritual that helps signal to your brain that rest is coming. Good sleep restores brain function, clears emotional residue, and prepares you for the next day with clarity and energy. Nutrition is another form of physiological signaling. What you eat doesn't just fuel your body. It communicates with your brain. Highly processed foods, sugar, and excess caffeine can spike cortisol and disrupt mood, while whole foods, healthy fats, and proper hydration support steady energy and clear thinking. You don't need a perfect diet, but you need a conscious one. Eat in a way that supports performance, not just pleasure. Because when your body is inflamed, sluggish, or crashing from blood sugar drops, your mental state will follow. Finally, light exposure is a powerful natural reset tool. Getting sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning sets your circadian rhythm, boosts mood, enhancing neurotransmitters like serotonin, and increases alertness. Likewise, avoiding bright light at night helps your body wind down naturally. These subtle environmental factors make a huge difference over time. They are part of the hidden architecture of a regulated, focused, high-performing mind. So if you're serious about resetting your life, don't just focus on mindset or goals. Start with biology. Regulate your breath, move your body, improve your sleep, eat with intention, manage your posture, and anchor your rhythm with light. These are not lifestyle tips. They are tools for rewiring your nervous system, because when your physiology shifts, your psychology follows. And from there, real change becomes not just possible, but inevitable